Hi, I'm Ginevra Castellano. I'm a professor in Intelligent Interactive Systems at the Department of Information Technology, Uppsala University, where I lead the Uppsala Social Robotics Lab. In this talk, I am going to present some of my lab's work on the investigation of how people emotionally perceive and react to robots. Today, robots are not only used as tools to do things that people cannot do or do not want to do, but also in socially assistive scenarios, where they provide people with social support. Think, for examples of robots acting as tutors and companions for children, personal assistants, tools in healthcare. These robots usually have a human-like appearance. They may have a head, eyes, arms. But while a more social and human-like appearance can help robots be more liked by people, it is not sufficient on its own to enable a successful social interaction with humans. Robots need to be endowed with social interactive skills. They need to understand they are interacting with a human, understand their social signals, recognize and express emotions, and adapt to the user's behavior in a way that is socially acceptable. The recently published EU guidelines for trustworthy AI warn of the need to study the social impact of AI systems integrated in all areas of our lives. AI systems such as robots in socially assistive roles can impact people's social relationships and attachment. So one important area of investigation is the study of how people emotionally respond to robots. One question that I address in my research is how a robot's human likeness in appearance and behavior influences people's affective perceptions and affective responses to robots. I will start with presenting results from some of our studies investigating the effects of robots' appearance on people's perception and responses to robots. We know from the literature that people tend to anthropomorphize robots, to attribute them human characteristics. We also know that people experience empathic concern even for non-anthropomorphic robots. Other results, however, suggest that the more human-like a robot is in appearance, the more likely people are to empathize with it. People's responses changes, though, in presence of very human-like robots such as androids. According to the uncanny valley hypothesis, human responses to a human-like robot would abruptly shift from empathy to revulsion as the robot approached but failed to attain a lifelike appearance. However, previous work has shown that people display mimicry behavior, which can be associated with empathy, in response to androids' facial expressions, even when they are perceived as uncanny. In summary, there is evidence in human-robot interaction research that, under certain conditions, people emotionally respond to robots. And this is confirmed by results from the neurosciences, according to which brain areas involved in perception and response to emotions in humans are also involved in the perception of emotions in robots. This raises the question: if the human brain is not tuned to process only biological entities, how human-like should robots be in order for people to emotionally respond to them? In collaboration with my PhD student Maike Petzel and postdoc Giulia Perugia, we study the effect of a robot's appearance on people's affective responses to robots. We are interested in people's attribution of robots' emotions and mimicry responses to robots' emotional expressions, two aspects that relate to empathy and our ability to connect with others. We use Ferhat, a mixed embodiment robot, which consists of a robotic head and a 3D back-projected virtual face, which makes it easier to manipulate its human likeness. We conducted a study where 46 participants watched a set of videos of Ferhat. We manipulated the emotions expressed by Ferhat: happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, anger, and disgust. We also manipulated the embodiment: a virtual agent on screen, a 3D embodied Ferhat, a video recording of the 3D embodiment, and the video of a human that the synthesized emotions in Ferhat are based on. Finally, we manipulated Ferhat's human likeness, which can be either character-like, human-like, or a morph between the two. Here are two examples of stimuli with the virtual and 3D physical embodiment. Happiness, and anger. We had several dependent variables in this study. We asked participants to rate the robot along a number of different perceptual dimensions, but we also asked them to report the emotions they thought the robot expressed. We also measured participants' mimicry of the robot's facial expressions. Here, I will discuss a subset of the results. Regarding the attribution of emotion, we found the main effect of human likeness and embodiment. People were more successful at recognizing Ferhat's emotion in the character-like version. A possible explanation is the higher level of abstraction in the character-like face, which potentially helps examining the emotional facial expressions. The recognition rate was higher for the recording of the real human, but the attribution of emotion was equally successful for the 3D embodied Ferhat and the virtual Ferhat on screen. We also found that the high recognition rate for emotion is negatively correlated with the uncanniness of the agent and positively correlated with its social presence. We also investigated mimicry responses of participants. The study was divided in two parts. In the first part, participants were asked to observe and recognize the facial expressions displayed by Ferhat. In the second part, they were instructed to observe and replicate the facial expressions of Ferhat. Here are some examples. We measured spontaneous mimicry from participants' videos collected in the first part of the study, while the analysis of the instructed mimicry from participants' videos in the second part is currently ongoing. Facial mimicry was measured using automatic detection of facial action units activation. We found that participants' ability to mimic Ferhat was affected by the agent's embodiment, but not their human likeness. Specifically, participants mimicked the video-recorded robot more than its physically co-present counterpart. In summary, we found that the degree of human likeness affects attribution of emotion, but not spontaneous mimicry, suggesting that the human likeness in a mixed embodiment robot might affect differently high and low level mechanisms associated with empathy and our ability to connect with others. More investigation on the synergies between embodiment and human likeness is needed, however, as research with more realistic androids point in a different direction, with human likeness playing a more salient role. Another interesting result is that uncanniness affects people's ability to attribute emotions to the robot. An open question currently under investigation is whether perceived uncanniness also affects low-level mechanisms of empathy, such as mimicry. I will now present some work on the effects of robots' behavior on people's perception of robots. I will present a case study where a robot acts as a tutor to promote children's learning by offering social support via personalized empathic strategies. This work has been conducted in the EU-funded project Emote, which I coordinated a few years ago. We investigated different scenarios where the robot promotes children's learning of geography topics in early secondary school, such as map reading and sustainable development. The robot interacts with children via multi-touch table with the learning activities and responds to the child's affective states and learning progress with teaching and empathy strategies using speech and nonverbal behaviors. Let's see a concrete example.
In the FP7 project, Emote, we are developing an empathic robot tutor with capabilities that allow it to engage in empathic interactions. To enable a robot to respond empathically, we need to model, interpret and respond to the learner's affective state with appropriate expressive behaviour and pedagogical actions to the current situation. This requires a new channel for expressive behaviour using facial, gesture and posture recognition, supporting empathy in the learning context and increasing the learner's engagement. The robot assists the learner in completing tasks with a range of pedagogical actions. For instance, if the learner is frustrated and having difficulty with a task, the tutor will present the answer, explain it and move on.
The symbol is located somewhere over here.
When the learner is successful, the empathic robot tutor will empathise with that and be happy for the student. The Emote empathic robot is one of the first of its kind, a robot that is able to interpret how the participant is feeling and modify its interaction accordingly.
We conducted a user study with two versions of the robot, an empathic one and a non-empathic one. In the empathic condition, the robot had the ability to infer children's affect and respond with speech-based empathic strategies modeled after human-human interactions. The robot also followed the child's head and moves and used emotional sound emblems to help create a subtle sense of empathic concern expressed by the robot. 26 children between 10 and 11 years old took part in the experiment and interacted with the robot for a maximum of 20 minutes. Analysis of post-activity questionnaires showed no significant difference in the perceived quality of interaction with the robot and learning gains between empathic and non-empathic condition. Children's perception of the robot's empathic capability, however, was higher in the empathic condition. An interesting follow-up study would assess the effect of the robot's empathy skills on quality of interaction and learning over a long-term period, and which of the empathy components implemented in the tutor are essential for creating empathic behavior. For example, it is currently unclear how the role played by the human-like empathic behaviors compares with the robot-like behaviors, such as the robot sound emblems. In conclusion, I presented two studies investigating people's affective perceptions and affective responses to robots displaying emotional and empathic behaviors. I showed that in experiments with a half virtual and half physical robot, human likeness seems to affect high and low level affective responses in different ways. I also showed that people are able to understand the human-like and robot-specific empathic traits in a robot. This work contributes to addressing a key question for ethical and trustworthy AI and robotics. When do people empathize and socially connect with robots? The conclusion is that to better answer this question, we need more studies investigating the interrelationship between a robot's appearance and behavior with different levels of humanness and robotness. Thank you.